John Frost, who's a very renowned journalist, and of course Sky News and Channel 4. So George, floor is yours, and it's a very, something very contemporary we need, I think, especially on Gaddafi. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Imran. I'm not entirely sure I can live up to your expectations after that introduction, which makes me sound much more important than I really am. The Henry Jackson Society, the organisation I work for, however, as many of you may know, is very important. We're very well plugged in with CIA, Mossad, MI6, and we did actually engineer Mr. Gaddafi's death for this debate in order to maximise turnout and enhance my prestige. No, I mean, obviously it's just a great coincidence. But I think obviously this evening is now very timely, and it's good to be back here at City University. This was I did my postgraduate degree here in investigative journalism not long ago. Did anyone here do the journalism course, MA?
No, I
Well, anyway, so it's nice to be back. I think this is my first time I've been back since. So anyway, so I'm here to talk to you about Libya and really the context more broadly than just Gaddafi. Whether this was a humanitarian intervention or an act of aggression. And it was very interesting today when the news first came in about the fall of Sirte and Colonel Gaddafi's rumoured capture. I'm sorry, you can't come in. No, I'm joking. The fall of Sirte, and then the rumours came in about the capture of Gaddafi. And my boss emails like, we need to get something out on this, and then another thing like, Gaddafi's dead. It's like, well, is he even captured? That's what we saw. I was actually on the BBC about 1:30 in the morning during when they reported that Saif al-Islam had been captured, you may recall, in that week in the run-up to the fall of Tripoli. And then the next thing was he appears in a convoy outside the Rixos Hotel. And pro-Gaddafi forces promptly lay siege to it with all the international journalists inside. So I said, well, let's see. But obviously he has been captured and killed, and we can talk about the ramifications of that later, and certainly in the Q&A, whether or not that was a good thing. But as I say, as I saw this information coming in, the divisions immediately became apparent, the polarity of opinion. On this issue. And, on the one hand, these so-called anti-war groups, Stop the War Coalition, made their opinion very clear. Lindsay German, in an article, sort of decrying Western triumphalism over Gaddafi's capture and death. I didn't see any of that. And condemning, yet again, this illegal intervention in Libya. And you contrast that with the reaction of most of the Libyans themselves that you actually heard on the television this afternoon. And, effectively, as far as I could see, I don't know if any of you are listening, there was concern, yes, but hope for the future, and overall just an immense relief that this man, who was responsible for the death of several thousand Libyans, including 1,000 in a single day, once, and all sorts of other crimes, was now gone, and that really sets the scene. And it was interesting when you were listening to these reactions, how every Libyan that I heard said that this was more important, the fall of Gaddafi, than had been even the fall of the capital Tripoli on the 23rd of August, a few months ago now, or even the fall of Sirte itself, obviously the final Gaddafi stronghold that took place the same day. And that, I think, really does emphasise the importance of Gaddafi within the Libyan framework. He was not an ordinary leader. He was the leader of one of the few, I would say, well, it's midway between an authoritarian and totalitarian state. But this Jamahiriya government that he had instituted, which was hierarchical in the extreme, a pyramid of power at which he sat at the very apex. And so for him to go, either to be captured and tried, or else obviously he's now been killed, was fundamental in terms of this conflict moving beyond this conflict stage and moving towards something of a reconstruction. The National Transitional Council hadn't yet put in place a transitional government. They've said they now will do so within 30 days. But you can see it wasn't the fall of Tripoli, it wasn't the fall of the capital that led to that transition stage taking place. It has been Gaddafi's fall. So anyway, I'm here tonight to speak to you about how we got to this point and whether this intervention on which we embarked was right. The third intervention by Western powers in the Muslim world in less than a decade. I'm pretty certain when President Obama gave his Cairo speech back in 2008, you remember, many said it was the most fantastic, sweeping extension of open arms to the Muslim world that had ever been seen. Others just dismissed it as a 6,000-word apology for the foreign policy of George W. Bush. But certainly this was a man who had no interest in overseas interventions. David Cameron likewise was very fond of saying that we don't do this neocon foreign policy. You can't impose democracy from 10,000 feet and any other number of pithy lines. Nicolas Sarkozy follows the French foreign policy, which is always just to be ruthlessly acting in France's interest, whether it's right or wrong. That at least is my interpretation. But with regards to the first two in particular, David Cameron and President Obama, and maybe I am being a bit harsh on Sarkozy, the point I'm trying to make is that this was clearly an extraordinary situation. These were not gung-ho interventionists, Obama and Cameron. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why then did they make this decision to intervene? And, you take yourselves back to February of this year, and it was the most extraordinary series of events, wasn't it? I mean, you had Tunisia, you had the uprising there that led to the fall of President Ben Ali, and then you had, obviously, a comparable uprising in Egypt, and that led to the downfall of President Hosni Mubarak there. And yet, Libya, no, it was Colonel Gaddafi, it turns out, had a rather firmer grip on the reins of power than had his predecessors in either the east or the west, in Tunisia and Egypt. And he was very clear. He said, in no uncertain terms, he was going to cleanse Libya house by house. These were dogs, they were rats. His son Saif, the great white hope that had been cultivated at the LSE, the successor to Cambridge University for producing the world's dodgiest men. And here they were. And we were in a situation where if nothing had happened, then there was the very real risk that the rebel stronghold of Benghazi, the place from where this revolution was launched, was going to find itself in very serious trouble indeed. And Imran mentioned one of the debates I did actually with David Frost, and I was speaking against John Barron, MP, who, as you may know, was the only Conservative MP to vote against the intervention. And he said, well, we can't be sure. We can't be sure that he would have massacred Benghazi. We can't be sure. Now, just because you cannot be sure that a massacre is not going to take place, as a leader of a democratic government, is that really sufficient cause? Yes, here we come, more leg comments. Is that really sufficient cause to stand back and do nothing at all and just hope for the best? This is, after all, a man, as I say, who had pledged to cleanse his country house by house. There were reports of a procession being machine-gunned at a funeral, I don't know if you remember that, of tanks crushing protesters. And this was clearly